So the start of this workshop will be streamed. So a special hello to those who are joining us via streaming. This workshop is covering mastering partnerships after COVID-19. Now, our host for this session will be Helen. Helen is the Managing Director of Youth Sport Trust International, which is a sport and development charity which supports young people around the world through play and sport. Please welcome to the stage, Helen.
Good morning, everyone, to you in the room and to everyone who's joining us by the live streaming. It's my absolute pleasure to be moderating this session today about mastering partnerships after COVID. So we hope to inspire you with examples of some really innovative partnerships that are already taking place. We hope to provoke you to think about your own partnerships and how you might develop them in the future. It is going to be interactive and there'll be lots of opportunities for you to ask lots of questions. So let's get started. We've got 3 guest partnerships and I'm going to introduce each partnership in turn to come up on stage and talk to us about the great work that they are doing together. So, from Novo Nordisk, I'd like to invite Niels Lund. From DGI, Mette Holm Rod. And from ISCA, you already know him, Jacob Schouenborg. Over to you, Jacob.
Thank you very much. We will be presenting this partnership very briefly now. The focus here is not so much about what exactly we're doing, but about the partnership that we have together. So our project and collaboration is called Move for Fun. It is fundamentally, as you can imagine, a physical activity program. You know all the stats, you know the facts about inactivity in the world, and it's just for us so fundamentally important to get started to addressing this problem. So what we have created is really bringing together 3 different partners with each their sets of expertise, and we're starting with DGI in terms of their knowledge on how to get disadvantaged kids to be more active. We want to create a physical activity program where they're active every week and making sure that they enjoy the benefits of that. We also appreciate that this is happening all over the world. It's not that we can just address this in any one country, but we want to test the methodology that we've evolved through the Danish experience in 2 to 3 countries first and take experiences from that. The vision obviously is to make sure that the kids enjoy, that's in the name as well, physical activity, so that they are active throughout their whole lives. So what I really like about this partnership is it's not just about talking anymore, it's about doing it. We understand the challenges, we understand how it can be difficult to address all the barriers, but fundamentally the program is about getting the kids active and doing that as soon as possible. So as you've heard from Helen, this is the partnership. We are very pleased to have initiated that on a global level between Novo Nordisk, DGI and ISCA. We believe, and you'll hear from my colleagues shortly, that we each one of us have something to contribute. And most importantly, indeed, is the fact that we work with ISCA members in these different countries to implement the program. So let me hand over first to Niels to explain from the Novo Nordisk perspective why they are in this partnership with ISCA and DGI, and indeed what Niels believes can be the valuable contribution from Novo Nordisk in this program.
Thank you. If you know Novo Nordisk, you'll probably know it as a pharmaceutical company, and therefore probably many of you will see it as part of the evil empire, or one of them. But we are also increasingly focusing on prevention of diabetes and obesity. Even if that might sound counterintuitive, it's actually a part of our heritage for more than 100 years and our ownership structure, because we are owned by a foundation. who has the purpose of running the company, but also support social, scientific, and humanitarian activities. And that permeates our organization also. So for the past 7 years, we've been running a program called Cities Changing Diabetes, where we work with municipalities, NGOs, academia, and private sector partners to prevent obesity and diabetes around the world. And this is why we went into the partnership. We felt that there was a missing piece to the puzzle here, namely physical activity. We had worked on healthy city planning, we had worked on food systems and so on, community engagement, but this was an opportunity to learn something new and bring that to the 40 cities now that are part of the network. And over to Mette from DGI.
Hello, everyone. DGI is the largest sport for all organization in Denmark, and we have a lot of experience in moving people, every people, and especially this target group we are talking about in this project. We had a lot of good experience with a similar project called Jump for Fun. Some of the experience we got from there was that 79% got more active after joining the program. Of course, that's easy when you come from almost zero. But 79 is still a very good number. What we also experienced was that they got 71% more energy after joining the program, and 84% got more friends. We know that's a very important factor for young people to move. So we thought we had a very good concept to export and to make sure that we got as many people moving within this project as well.
And from the ISCA perspective, fundamentally being part of a project, not only involving interesting partners from different sectors, but actually also enabling ISCA members to do more and better programs was just evidently good for us. So we were super excited to go into this partnership together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacob. There will be an opportunity for you to interact in more detail with each of the partnerships, and I'm sure you'll have some real questions to drill more deeply into what is a really groundbreaking partnership, and definitely one to follow. So thank you very much. Please stay on stage. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Megumi Aoyama from United Nations High Commission for Refugees and Paul Hunt from Sport and Dev. Please come and join us.
Great. Can you hear me? Oh, perfect. Great. Thank you so much, ISCA, for having us here. And it is really a pleasure to speak a little bit about the partnership between the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, and sportanddev.org. So if we can show some of the slides that we have prepared. Fantastic. Thank you. So why are we partnering together? And it's really, the objective is quite clear. We together want to advocate for the use of sport as an effective and really a credible protection tool in displaced settings, an effective tool for supporting refugees. So how do we want to do this together? Well, we wanted to create a platform where various actors, for example, practitioners, researchers, policymakers, could come and showcase and share good practices as well as innovation in this field of sport and refugees, but also build the capacity and knowledge space in this sphere. And also to have a place where we could really stimulate the discussions, the debate, also the consultations with policymakers and practitioners, and really explore together how we could better support refugees through sport. Now, UNHCR, as you might know, is not a sport organization. We are a leading agency in protection and assistance for refugees and forcibly displaced. However, in the past years, gratefully, we have had many sport organizations approach us asking for guidance. How can we use sport for refugees? How do we move into this sphere? And we really saw the need to be able to direct these interested actors to a space where maybe they can learn, benefit from the resources that are available, and really grow together with us in developing this sphere. And this is why we chose sportanddev.org to partner with us, because as you might know, they are the one-stop shop for up-to-date information around sport for development, and actually has quite a unique global reach in terms of reaching practitioners, researchers, policymakers, and really there was no other credible alternative for us. So it's really a great pleasure to partner with them, and maybe I'll pass over to Paul to speak a little bit about why they've decided to partner with UNHCR and also share some of the activities that we have been implementing since our partnership since 2020.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Megumi, and also thanks to ISCA for inviting us on, just to acknowledge what an incredible job you've done with this event in such difficult circumstances as well, so much appreciated. From Sport and Dev's perspective, we had wanted to do something on the topic of sport and refugees for quite some time, especially as there'd been a lot of negative stereotypes and stories in the media in Europe since the 2015 displacement crisis. So we wanted to think about how we could play a role in advocacy and knowledge sharing. And when thinking about partners, UNHCR was the obvious choice, really, as the leading specialist organization on the topic of refugees, as a neutral United Nations agency with a huge amount of convening power to get different organizations together on this topic. And so we started last year, and you can see on this slide a bit of a summary of the activities that we've done. As Megumi touched on, we launched a section on sport and refugees. The URL is on the screen, and there you can find a lot of different resources for running programs, for influencing policy, for different things related to this topic. In 2020, we also launched a week of action on the topic, where we had a global webinar with academics, NGOs, policymakers, and others. We collected 44 articles as part of a call for articles from different organizations around the world. And we also had a Twitter Q&A with Joe Ferris of the Olympic Refuge Foundation. Very recently, last week, we had another week of action. This time the topic is a bit more precise on supporting displaced women and girls through sport. Again, you can see the details on the screen. Would encourage you to check out the recent webinar. We've seen Khalida Popo speaking at this conference. So if you'd like the opportunity to hear more from her, then have a look at the Sport and Dev YouTube channel. In addition, we had Rose Leconnion, who is a two-time Olympic participant, part of the Olympic refugee team, as well as other speakers who all did a great job. So we'd encourage you to check that out. We also have a call for articles running at the moment on the topic of supporting displaced women and girls through sport, where we are looking to gather expertise on this topic. Would encourage any of you who would like to share experiences, methodologies, approaches to get in contact. And my email address is on the screen there, hunt@sa4d.org. So you're more than welcome to speak to me here or get in contact if you're interested in that. Can see my time is running out. So just to quickly come to a close, the last thing that we've launched this year is a weekly summary of news on this topic of sport and refugees. So we'd encourage you to follow that as well. Just a final note, and I kind of touched on this on the description of the call for articles, but something we're really focusing on at the moment and interested to hear from you or your ideas on this is how to bring more people into this space, into discussions, knowledge sharing, advocacy on sport and refugees from across different sectors, geographies, and so on. So that's a conversation we'd be interested in having. But thanks a lot, I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Megumi and Paul. With sport and refugees being such a key theme of this Congress, I'm sure you will be inundated with questions. And I've already negotiated with Paul an extra deadline before I need to get my article in. It was Sunday, but I think we can have a bit more time. So if you are interested in contributing, please do talk to them when you meet them later. Now, it gives me great pleasure now to introduce Elena Marin from Laureus, and from Swedish Postcode Foundation, David Given-Sjölander.
Hello, is it working? Yeah. Hi. Well, thank you very much for having us here. It's a pleasure for me to be in this Congress. My name is Elena Marin. I'm the head of programs and grants at Laureus Sport for Good. For those who are not very familiar with Laureus, so we have been around since the year 2000. We are a foundation supporting organizations that use sport as a tool for social change. So we believe in the power of sport to change the world. And we believe on the power of sport to change the life of children and young people who are living in situations of violence, discrimination, or disadvantage. So doing that, we provide funding and we also provide capacity building and technical support to organizations. So we believe in the power of working together and to bring in learning together. And that, I think, is the spirit that brings us to work together with the Swedish Postcode. We have been working together for quite a while. We first started doing work together in the year 2017. So it was a summit that we organized together in Stockholm to bring together sport for development or sport for good or sport for change organizations in Europe. And it was in that summit that it was discussed the need of organizations in Sweden to work together to build the sport for development sector in Sweden. So it was a need from the organizations to work together to have a voice and to build a network that can represent the sector in Sweden. So it was from that seed that we started thinking about working together further and think of what our experience from Laureus and the experience from the Sport for Swedish Postcode Foundation can do together. So it took us a few years to set up a program and a partnership. It took us also a pandemic in the middle, so that's a good excuse to actually be a little bit delayed. And it was actually, yeah, so this year in 2021, when we have been really starting to build the work in Sweden. The program and the partnership that we are doing together is to provide support to organizations in Sweden to bring their organizations together and to share learning. Also to do research on what is important for organizations in Sweden, and also to set up a network. So the role of Laureus is to provide or build a sport for development accelerator in Sweden. That is to provide capacity building specifically to organizations in the areas that they consider that are important for them. So then they can grow up like a stronger organizations that they can implement stronger programs in Sweden. And through a research that we are starting to identify what is going to be exactly the theme of the research with organizations in Sweden, we would like to starting to bring a voice together, to have into the data and the impact that we want to create in Sweden. So that is the role of Laureus Sport for Good. So because we have been working in the sector for 20 years, and because we have been working with organizations in so many different countries, we are bringing to the partnership our experience and the knowledge of other organizations to work with organizations in Sweden. Yeah.
That sounds like an awesome project. Hi, everyone. Listen, I'm just going to keep myself really short here and introduce the Swedish Postcode Foundation. For those of you who don't know who we are an organization that supports projects globally on human rights, climate action within the sectors of culture and sport, which leads to the partnership with Laureus and the work that we're doing within Sports for Development. You've heard the project, and what's really cool about this project, and it's really it's a different way of working, is that normally you have a relationship between two organizations and they go and deliver, but this project was actually born out of consultation with about 30 plus organizations feeding into what was needed and how we as a partnership could best support them. And that's work that we at the foundation are long-term committed to doing, but it is in consultation with the organizations. And during the keynote, Dr. Fiona mentioned something around complement, don't duplicate and align. And I think this project absolutely speaks to that. We have the insight from the Swedish perspective about what's been going on given the 6 years we've been funding organizations there. Laureus has 20 years of experience in the sports for development niched area, but then we have information coming from 30 plus organizations, not just during the project, but also informing the very foundation of this project. And that's something that we're going to continue to keep doing moving forward, so that all the time we're delivering something, not just what we think is needed, but what is actually needed by the organizations who are part of this movement.
Thank you very much. So, three fascinating insights there into three very different partnerships, bringing together very different organizations. And listening to you, what struck me is it takes time to build the right partnership. And it isn't always easy, but you really need to make sure that you find the right partner so that you can work together effectively. So I'd like to probe a little bit more with all of you, and I'd like you to perhaps start thinking about questions you might like to raise either in this session or when you break down into smaller groups. It will depend on the time. So I'll start off with an easy one, which I'll ask all of you. What advice would you give to organizations? Some of you here may have developed partnerships, but some of you might be thinking, how do I go about creating an effective partnership? So what advice would you give to organizations who are maybe not quite sure how to go about it? So I will start by asking Megumi and Paul to perhaps answer that question.
Sure, Helen, thank you. And I think what you've mentioned, it does take time to try to find the right partner. And so from our perspective, maybe 2 points. One is to have clear objectives, and then two is to really realistically assess what each partner is able to bring to the table as an added value. It sounds very straightforward, but I think it's actually quite difficult, especially around the objectives, because in many cases, what happens is that you end up making a mistake of trying to partner just for the sake of having a partnership, maybe because it sounds nice, maybe because, you know, the brands look good together, or you meet someone in the conference and it sounds like, you know, maybe we'll hit it off, let's work together. And I think the spirit is beautiful. And yes, we all should join efforts and work together, but it's really important to have clear objectives on what you exactly would like to accomplish together. What are the outcomes? What are the outputs that the two organizations or a multi-stakeholder partnership could accomplish together? And then I think the next step is really assessing what is the added value that each partner can bring. And I think for us, as we mentioned, and all the partnerships here, we really have clear ideas on which each entity brings to the table as an added value. And you really have to be realistic. And I also think it has to be two-way. So it can't just be one organization bringing in, you know, all the work into the partnership, but that both partners are really benefiting and working towards achieving the objective that you set. So over to you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Megumi. Just, I think Megumi's covered that extremely well, but just to add to it very briefly, obviously the importance of networking, coming to events like this, going on LinkedIn, getting in contact with people there has been quite successful for Sport and Dev at times in the past. And then I think Megumi really hit the nail on the head when she emphasized the importance of having quite clear objectives, thinking about what partners you actually need for a particular project and why, and before you have a conversation with a specific organization, having a think about what form of collaboration you could build. We have conversations with different organizations all the time, and it's important to be quite clear about that from the outset, I think, because otherwise it doesn't necessarily materialize in anything concrete.
Thank you, Paul. Elena and David, is there anything you'd like to add to that in terms of how to form a great partnership?
That is the ultimate question. I mean, it's kind of the big parts have already been covered, and I think aligned values as organizations is the key one. I mean, if you don't start on that foundation, all the tips and tricks about how you do a good partnership around communications and around having open dialogue, they help, but if you start from a foundation where you're not aligned on what it is that you want to achieve, you're always going to be starting from the wrong starting point. So really nailing down that clear objectives, as was said, is the starting point.
Yeah, I also think that in a partnership it's important to establish a relationship of trust and equality between the members of the partnership. So it's obviously about having objectives and having roles in the partnership, but it's also about learning from each other, about having the flexibility to adapt to the changes in the program, because you set up your objectives and your outcomes at the beginning, but things change and you have to adapt and work together. And that means learning from the other, being flexible on the way that you want to implement your activities and how you want to do things, and trusting on your partner for going together along that path.
Right, thank you. And Niels, we have you here from the corporate world, so it would be fascinating to get a bit of an insight from you in terms of what you look for when somebody looks to partner with you, and what influences your decision making around partnership.
Well, first, I think it's important to recognize that we are different. We won't be the same. We come from different backgrounds, organizational structures, purposes are different. That's okay. I think the importance is to find where the circles are overlapping, and investing in that time and energy into that is really important. When we look at partnerships, because we're very much a science-based organization, you know, when we develop drugs and interventions more broadly, they have to be proven to be effective. And taking that science-based approach to things, also collaborations here, what evidence are there for the interventions? What can we do? How can we measure them? Actually sets a level playing field for everyone. And if we look at the data together, stay away from our predefined hypothesis about what is the right thing, and then develop the hypothesis together based on the data is really in my experience a good way forward, and actually a trust building process going forward. And then I think it's you know where I come from, so there are of course always some aspects of possible curiosity is probably a good place to start from, but we certainly also experience the need to build trust, and we can only do that through actions. And sometimes partnerships won't emerge, but then sometimes they do emerge, and then we build a high degree of collaboration and confidence and trust in each other over time. I look for innovation. When I look at diabetes and obesity, to answer your question specifically, there's prevention of chronic disease is significantly underfunded, and frankly speaking, there are not that many much evidence in things that are actually working on a population level. So we need to find innovation both in the interventions that we are doing. We need to focus on probably the most vulnerable groups, because also in chronic disease there's a very strong social gradient. And then we look to innovative ways of financing. And the private sector is one avenue to find ways of financing, but I'm also looking to, in the combination with new interventions, innovations, and that also to see, hopefully, why don't we, bring our proposals forward to pension funds, so they see, just as they fund the funding windmills and green energy these days, that's a strong driver of return to our pension funds. Where we have our pensions, why wouldn't we have population health as the investment object? That's what I'm really looking forward to also. And that's probably where, from a private sector point of view, and understanding the business case, if you can say that, but at least the investment opportunity, then I think we could unlock to also what Fiona said, unlock potential new sources of funding that would be in addition to the funding that is necessary from public sector and from communities as such. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Niels. So think about innovation when you're making approaches to the corporate sector. Don't just go asking for money, I'm hearing there. Jacob and Mette, as partners with Novo Nordisk, is there anything you'd like to add from your perspective?
Well, I think being a non-profit organization and partnering up with, for example, Novo Nordisk, that is a challenge, but it's also a strength in many ways, because we are being forced into thinking otherwise. We are being structured in otherwise. And I think when you do something different, you also get another perspective on things and you develop. So I think it's interesting to see how partnerships can develop your product, your way of thinking, your way of structuring a partnership, and also, a day at the office, for example.
Thank you.
So I think that's definitely a strength.
Thank you. Fundamentally, what I would like to share about this partnership is that working with DGI, whom we know very well, and getting to know Novo Nordisk has been a very interesting journey. It's been super, super slow, to be frank. It's like 2-3 years in the making of getting to know each other. Took a bike ride with Niels one time, then we talked a little bit more, and maybe didn't pick up the phone that time. No offense. And then once we actually made an agreement, it's been a long time to establish these partnerships in Poland and other places. We try to develop the program. It takes a lot of time, and you need to understand what the other partners are about. How does Novo Nordisk, as a pharmaceutical company, the most valuable one in Denmark, I think, one of the biggest ones on the planet, how do they work? It's super interesting, but it takes a lot of time. So I think it's about patience and a little bit of understanding also that it really, really is important to be curious, understand each other's interests, and respect those interests as well.
Thanks, Jacob. It's great that we're really starting to get into the nitty-gritty, and it's not just a case of, this is our partnership and everything's wonderful, because partnerships never like that. There are always challenges along the way. So I think this is a perfect sort of segue into the next section, which will focus into some group workings. So I think we're going to say goodbye now to the people who've been joining us live stream. And I'm going to hand back to Caroline, who's going to talk to you about the next step when you all get really involved and you can give these guys on stage a real grilling. Thank you.